Typically, when describing the online political space that we inhabit together, there is an analogy made about the relationships between streamers. They say that our relationship to each other are very similar to that of our solar system. There are certain content creators that are massive in size compared to the average. They might be 1% or less of the entire creator space, but capture upwards of 90% of the audience. Smaller creators who are trying to break into the space sometimes find it best to try to collaborate with bigger creators in the same genre to try and grow their own audience. They fall into orbit around these larger content creators, and thus are often dubbed orbiters. As an orbiter, a lot of your success is tied to staying in the good graces of the creator you are now orbiting, due to your dependence on their audience, until one day you have enough fans to create your own orbiters. But as of late, I have found using a celestial model to describe the relationships between content creators to be limiting. I started wondering if there was something here on Earth that I could use to mirror the relationships more accurately. Something I could use to perhaps predict my own way to the top, or warn me about the potential pitfalls I should avoid. I began to start mapping out the relationships between the many streamers I follow, and what began to form was different than what I had expected. The relationships began to look a lot more feudal. Hey everybody, it's Will, and this is my channel. Now, I'm not one to reinvent the wheel, so if I'm gonna try to get you to change your perspective from the typically accepted planet-orbiter relationship to my new theory of there being a feudalistic hierarchy to online pull, there must be a good reason. And of course there is, to me, baby. I think that I can show how streamers interact with each other more accurately than ever, and with this elucidation, I can use it to potentially explain how some content creators get their audience. Or at the very least, I can tell you a fun story. Gather round so that I may tell you the tale of the three kingdoms of online politics. Three monarchies with the largest shared audiences and influence, minus a few that I want to quickly talk about now. People like Hassan the Hun, who moved his entire kingdom to an island far away from what we would normally call online pull. He sold the essence of his friendship to the devil and made a split from the ancient Daliban lands to move overseas to a place where he could grow a massive, normie audience, distinctly separate from the area of online pull I want to focus on today, so we will skip content creators like him. There are online media outlets like The Daily Wire, The Majority Report, Piers Morgan, The Young Turks, even people like David Pakman, who have their own completely different environment that they have to navigate, being content creators catering to a more mainstream audience. We might all be online together, talking about politics, but they are far away from the groups that I want to talk about today, because I think that the most powerful bonds that content creators have between each other is fueled by shared audience. But before I tell you too much about the relationships and power dynamics between the numerous streamers of online pull, we need to know who these kings, lords, and knights are, to give their dynamics context. Today, I am focusing on a left, a right, and a center, whose audiences are currently in the middle of a 100 years war. King Vaush of the Vaushite Empire arose similarly to Hassan the Hun. Vaush split from the Daliban after a failed coup as Lord Irish Laddie in 2019. Since the split, he has amassed his own large kingdom of left-wing content creators. Lord Avalon, after seeing the holy light of the left, made a transition that is still proving difficult, but his place in Vaush's fiefdom was made solid when Vaush humanized him in a debate while he was getting massive flack during his transition from the right to the left. Lord Slanderhall, the purveyor of Purge, has been a close friend and fierce ally of the Vaushite Empire since the very beginning. He is perhaps one of Vaush's oldest lords. The demon, first spawned in early 2020, has risen in popularity over the years and is well known for her trans, supply chain, and education takes. She has since been courted and defended by King Vaush on even some of her most outrageous opinions. Many lords and knights from the Daliban have attempted to exorcise the demon. Exalted Knight of the Daliban, Hans of Harkir was perhaps the closest. Lady Keffels, the conqueror of Kiwi farms, has been at war with many other kingdoms, but none caught the same fire and attention as her frequent scuffles with the Daliban. There's currently a ceasefire between Lady Keffels and the Daliban due to threat of legal decree from its monarchical leader, King Stephen. Many charity projects that she has set up over the years have been fueled by donations from the Vaushites. There are several knights in their steed, such as Ser Castley of Neolibralia and Ser Sunday of Melitonia. But when the fortress arc started, it was hard for King Vaush to gather new allies. This has resulted in King Vaush having significantly less lords and knights in his fiefdom than that of the Daliban. Over time, we are seeing King Vaush's fortress lower its defenses in attempts to get new influence in more mainstream political kingdoms, such as Young Turkey. The Vaushite Empire has attracted around 500,000 serfs to its name, but they do not possess the same vigor as those in other kingdoms. The amount of serfs in this kingdom has also remained fairly stagnant the past few years, and this probably speaks to King Vaush's inability to entice other more middle-of-the-road knights and serfs to his cause. Inshallah, the Daliban. The Daliban is a wise and proud kingdom that is headed by none other than the infamous King Stephen Benel II, or as he is called in some circles, Destiny, because interactions with this one man can literally change your life. The history of the Daliban stretches longer than almost any other kingdom online. 10 years ago, King Stephen first took rise in the ancient game of StarCraft II. He began to make a shift to debate and political content around 2016, and has since then garnered a massive kingdom that even after several insurrections and successful coups has remained one of the largest and most cohesive online communities in the world. But how did King Stephen get his crown, and how has he managed to remain influential for so long? Firstly, he got in early. When Destiny first started streaming, the land was open and fertile. King Stephen was at the right place at the right time to build an online empire. Secondly, he is incredible at moving serfs to his side from opposing kingdoms. Destiny is a charming and intelligent guy, and is able to use his charisma, debate skills, and silver tongue to grow his empire. With each new conversation had, his circle strengthens. Thirdly, he has been able to network more effectively with other people in the online politics space by implicitly giving away large pieces of his kingdom to an extremely devoted set of lords and ladies, who then bestow vassalhood onto an innumerable amount of knights that ride underneath the Daliban flag either directly or indirectly. He does this by funneling his enormous amount of loyal serfs to different streamers that are underneath him, or by having up-and-coming knights or lords appear in his court while he is live streaming to entice his audience to view them when he is offline. Lords such as Lord Chud the Logical, the Daliban's bellman. With the nose of an English pointer, it is said that Chud can smell spicy drama from 100 yards away. A man with little patience, he is not one to trifle with. Failure to deliver the goods can lead to a swift death by Lord Chud's executioner, DK. Lady Brittany of Levels, the Siren of DGG, has an extremely devoted cult following that has arisen out of the fruits of around 20 to 30 hours of conversations with King Stephen, and various other drama between other lords and knights. She now has her own religion that can systematically categorize any person in the world. Lady Erudite of Psychometronica has seen the largest jump in creator growth in the kingdom over the past year, and has been able to use Destiny's fief in one of the most effective ways possible. Her content ranges from dating advice, the manosphere, to mental health tips. She punches above her weight on exponentially larger streams than herself due to her own extremely solid content machine and the ability to attract audience outside of Destiny's direct vassalhood. Lord Carson of Meta was single-handedly taken from serfdom and placed into the ranks of the lords, much to their dismay. His flock of horses are small, but virile. As of writing this document, Lord Carson is waging an all-out war against the Daliban to solidify his own kingdom. But will he ever truly be able to escape the grasp of the Daliban? The knights that ride underneath King Stephen's banner are too numerous to name, but the most prominent are Dame Cherie, Ser Wick, Dame Dusty, Ser Supreme, Sir Hans, Sir Pisco, Sir Counterpoints, Sir Relevant, Dame Zonia, and many, many more. With a little flair, a knight is created from almost any content creator that King Destiny comes into contact with. The serfs are not only greater in number than any other kingdom in online poll, but they are also dedicated. They have participated in 2 election campaigns. They have committed such acts as Bloody Sunday, where they murdered Twitch Plays Pokemon, K911, and exclamation point shoot, which led to the genocide of an innumerable amount of mrgirl followers. The many people underneath the Daliban flag have experienced great growth and prosperity as their faithful leader expands his kingdom to less politically oriented lands, such as No Jumper and Fresh and Fit. Sometimes, even a lucky lord or lady gets to make an appearance alongside the king himself. There's no sign of King Destiny or the Daliban slowing in growth anytime soon. The only sizable kingdom with a more mobilized and fanatic fanbase and online pull than the Daliban is that of the Groyper Army. King Fuentes went from being a loser serf to having a small but radical kingdom in what felt like a matter of months. In early 2016, King Fuentes, a serf yet to be a king, began an online show called America First, following Donald Trump's 2016 election. His first claim to fame was an appearance at the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charleston, Virginia, where several hundred other white nationalists took to the streets to protest the tearing down of a Confederate statue. That was the same rally, if you'll remember, that ended with an extremist right-winger driving his Dodge Challenger through a crowd of people that resulted in one person being killed and 35 people being injured. Sadly, this was not the last time we would hear about the alt-right or King Fuentes. For the next several years, Fuentes gathered a small legion of radicals by streaming regularly on YouTube, as well as making frequent visits to college campuses. In January of 2020, Fuentes was banished from YouTube for violating their hate speech policy and left for redder pastures. It was time for a change. The Groypers packed up their ideology and made pilgrimage towards new and unexplored lands. The Groypers crowned King Fuentes King of the Groyper Army and King of the Incels, because Elliot Rodger was indisposed. King Nick, in collaboration with Conspiracy Merlin Alex Jones, set up their own live streaming service to compete with Twitch and YouTube called Cozy TV, where they could stream regularly without the fear of being removed from the internet. In February of 2020, the Groyper Army held their first annual America First Political Action Conference, which was an abject failure. The budget was low and the speakers bottom of the barrel, but that didn't stop them from trying again the following year. Far-right extremism was reaching a boiling point, and King Nick was positioning himself to spread his influence and gain ground for his kingdom. A month after the attacks on the Capitol, King Nick received a sizable amount of gold in the form of $250,000 in Bitcoin from a French computer programmer, who mysteriously committed suicide shortly thereafter. With some dollars in the coffer, AFPAC 2021 was held at the Hilton Hotel in Orlando, Florida, a month after the insurrection. The production value increased dramatically. There were more speakers, and they were less on the fringes of the alt-right than before. King Nick was gaining ground and feeling more confident, and who could blame him? I mean, a month earlier, the alt-right was trying to hang Mike Pence for certifying the 2020 election. Extremism in America was blooming in a way that most Americans didn't think was possible, and King Nick and his nefarious band of Groypers were loving every second of it. While the internet was laughing, the Groyper Army was networking. The 2022 AFPAC convention. The Hilton refused to host the Groypers again, so they moved the conference literally across the street to a nearby Marriott. The conference was sponsored by the up-and-coming social media platform Gab. They had many influential speakers from the alt-right, as well as 4 elected officials from the US government. The alt-right's AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene, had this to say: "It doesn't matter if I'm speaking to Democrat union members or 1,200 young conservatives who feel cast aside and marginalized by society. The Pharisees of the Republican Party may attack me for being willing to break barriers and speak to a lost generation of young people who are desperate for love and leadership." Right. In addition to elected officials, the conference also hosted a variety of far-right media personalities, including Gavin McInnes, Jesse Lee Peterson, and Milo Yiannopoulos. Fuentes claimed that Yiannopoulos was responsible for connecting him with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. It is evident that this relationship between Milo and Nick would continue to prove useful in connecting King Nick with people in more mainstream kingdoms to push his message, including most recently, the artist formerly known as Kanye West. Yay. Since Cozy TV's launch, people have been moving underneath King Nick's rule as they are banished from other lands. The lords of the Groyper Army are few, and the biggest names relevant to online poll are as follows. Lord Kai, a young Groyper who is featured sometimes in front of Dame Dusty's court. Conservative, young, and can't explain exactly what the Groypers stand for. A perfect lord for King Fuentes. Lord Tech, who is initially seen as a total nobody, somehow was able to take down Lord Carson's entire YouTube channel by having the Groyper Army raise their banners to a few of his most salacious ballads. The most recent addition to King Fuentes' fiefdom was none other than Lord Sneeko. whose soul was won by King Nick in an epic war waged with the Daliban. Lord Sneeko has proved a useful tool to give Fuentes and the Groyper Army access to an audience that is large, young, and easy to influence. Lord Sneeko also sanitizes King Nick to appear less like an ethno-nationalist. King Destiny, as much as he tried, did not have the strength to turn Sneeko and his incredibly large and naive audience onto the path of liberal enlightenment. Anyone that is currently streaming on Cozy TV may or may not consider themselves a knight to King Fuentes, but they are. And with his vassalhood comes some level of control. An invite is required from Nick himself to stream in his kingdom, and realistically, you could be pulled at any time. If you wanted to be reminded of how crass the old internet was, look no further than the chat of anyone in the Groyper Army. The reactionary fervor of the serfs of the Groyper Army really cannot be overstated. They only may be between 45,000 and 70,000 strong, but the Groypers are growing in number and prominence every year, spreading and growing through alternative channels like Telegram and Signal. They are having successful mass flagging campaigns regularly against content creators that speak out against them. It is this historian's opinion that the Groypers will grow until something is done to limit their powers, so that the root of their archaic ideas can be suppressed and extinguished. In medieval Europe from the 14th century all the way up until the end of the 19th century, there was a social and economic system that rose to prominence called feudalism. The defining feature of this system was a breakdown of power and landholdings between kings, lords, knights, and serfs. Kings were monarchical families that had conquered the lands in the generations prior and were the hegemonic powers in the areas that they lived in. As their lands and power grew, the kings needed people to watch over and manage the lands and its people. The king would enter a relationship with a lord and lend him a section of his land and its inhabitants, called a fief. The lord would become the king's vassal and was responsible for keeping the taxes, food, etc. flowing upwards in the kingdom. The sections of the lands that the lords controlled had its own set of vassals, called knights, who were people that were loyal to their lords. Their primary function was to manage the serfs around them and bear arms if their king ever called for an army. The serfs ranked lowest in the feudal system. They were literally tied to the land that they lived on. Conquering armies would leave them alone so that they could remain productive after the kingdom was conquered, and their loyalty was solely to that of whoever owned the fiefdoms above them. When streaming began to be popular, like most things, the first people to start were the first people to gather large audiences. As newer people entered the space over time, there was naturally less audience to go around. And with the way that streaming is currently set up, with no algorithm and barely any searchability, the best advice that is given to new streamers is to collaborate with other creators who make similar content, or redirect your audience from other locations with better algorithms. Destiny, Vaush, and Fuentes have large audiences of viewers that are unique to them and have minimal overlap. They have a large swath of content creators underneath them that depend on them for content, proximity, and exposure. Groups materialize, content creation metas form, entire livelihoods are spawned out of relationships sometimes 2 or 3 times removed from the original source of the content. And this isn't on accident. It makes sense. The larger the content creator you collaborate with or react to, the more likely it will be found in the ocean of 3 viewer Andes and 200 view YouTube videos. It's in the best interest of the average online poll personality to take up arms for their king and try to make a place for themselves in the fiefdom with their hashtags, clickbait titles, and frequent panel appearances. If you play your cards right, if you're charismatic and interesting, funny, smart, then maybe the people who came to watch someone else might look you up and become your fans too. But are they really your fans? If you talk to any of the streamers that are part of the Daliban, they will tell you about something colloquially known as the Destiny effect. When King Stephen comes online, everyone in his kingdom takes a viewership hit across the board. This leads to some members of the Daliban planning their streaming time around when Destiny isn't streaming to maximize their viewership. If you're curious about your rank in the Daliban, see how much audience you retain when the rest of the monarchy goes live. If you're curious about who you're beholden to, look to where your audience goes when they aren't watching you. Content creators inside of these kingdoms are as incestuous as the royalty of the Middle Ages. People all across the hierarchy and from other kingdoms cover and react to each other's content, which drives viewership back and forth between the players involved. In the Daliban, Destiny and his lords can trickle the viewers in their fiefdom upward at almost any given moment by calling them to court. The highest viewed and most covered content is almost always interpersonal drama, impromptu tribunals amongst the lords and knights that can have devastating effects on people's place in the feudalist hierarchy. The main goals remain based, be a gigachad, and avoid being soy at all costs. It's one of the fundamental things that separates this group of online pull from the David Pakman, TYT, or the Ben Shapiro types. Most of the streamers in the three hierarchies described will die on their sword holding this opinion. Online pull is primarily an entertainment space. I didn't used to think this, but after a couple of years of trolling around this space, I can safely say that it is entertainment first, with a little dash of political commentary on the side sometimes. Is it any one person's fault that the dynamics between the characters in these kingdoms make most reality shows look like scripted trash? I don't think so. This is a viewer-based economy. The meta is presently monarchical, and to make a living, you too must woo the serfs of the kingdom. Perhaps a different way to view this feudalist hierarchy is a space that at its backbone is powered by various Venn diagrams of shared audiences, and your king intersects all of them. I don't elucidate this to you to discourage you from attempting to gain the court of a content king or lord. It can unmistakably be a life-changing event for a content creator. But heed this warning. Hassan, Vaush, Bob7, Anna, Melina, Relevant, Daliburns, Not So Erudite, Brittany Simon, Lav, Hawes. The list could fill a Bible with people destiny has given either prosperity or the guillotine. One of the most recent and explosive examples of this dynamic is that of mrgirl, a serf-turned-lord now waging war with the Daliban to establish himself as the king of his own castle. mrgirl has been a content creator for a long time, but he skyrocketed from humble serf to wealthy lord in what felt like a matter of months, all thanks to one particular date with destiny. In December of 2020, mrgirl began his live streaming career after having 2 successful conversations with King Stephen and 1 unsuccessful conversation with King Vaush. A vassalhood was implicitly extended to mrgirl, and Lord Carson became King Destiny's friend and loyal Daliban flag carrier for the following year. When Lord Carson began his streaming career, he was on Twitch, and his audience was a mix of largely Daliban serfs as well as a sect of his own fanbase that he had accumulated from creating provocative and thought-provoking YouTube essays. Over time, the Daliban foot soldiers, intrigued by mrgirl's strange but comprehensive worldview, began to follow Lord Carson, and became indistinguishable from his original fans. This new fanbase, dedicated specifically to Lord Carson, were ordained as his horses. Several loyal foot soldiers formed organically, such as Elderdrazi, Smeth, and many more. mrgirl only intentionally knighting one person, much to his followers' chagrin, Lavloon, now attempting to make a comeback as the Dark Witch Femoid. Too small to see at the time, a small ember began to glow on Lord Carson's bridge to King Stephen. mrgirl is a polarizing man, and over time he found it harder and harder to stake it out in the lands of the other lords and knights. He was banned from Twitch and later had his YouTube channel deleted after a mass flagging campaign from Lord Tech of the Groyper Army. The rift widened between Lord Carson and King Stephen. Destiny was on a diplomacy campaign attempting to wine and dine King Nick. Lord Carson thought he was inadvertently sanitizing the Groyper Army's beliefs to the Daliban Empire. Lord Carson attempted to voice some concerns that he had with the serfs of the Daliban, as well as King Destiny himself. He did this on the public forum known as the Destiny subreddit. Lord Carson and the horses began to flood the square. Before long, one of Destiny's squires named Forethought banned Lord Carson from speaking on the subreddit, and a decree was made that gave members of the Daliban permission to murder horses perusing the subreddit on site, in a massacre known as !shoot. When the dust settled, King Stephen offered to reinstate Lord Carson's place on the subreddit, but mrgirl refused to take a podium constructed from the glue of his horses. Lord Carson was presented with a hard choice. He was at a fork in the road, and on one side was more of the same, paving his path deeper and deeper into Daliban territory. The other, a path of independence, required him to give up his vassalhood to the person that had given him his entire streaming career, and potentially ending his friendship. Lord Carson decided to publicly make a split from the Daliban Empire and has been waging war against King Stephen and his large array of lords and knights ever since, stemming from an upcoming decree coming on possible infidelities that King Stephen might partake in surrounding his vassals, set to arrive about a month from now. Maybe. If a huge content creator lends someone their audience to create their entire career, can they take it away just as easily? Destiny objectively granted mrgirl an enormous boost in audience following just a few short interviews, but those were not yet mrgirl's fans, they were King Stephen's. It wasn't until mrgirl proved himself as someone as interesting and as provocative as King Stephen that he was able to get an audience that was distinctly separate from the other 800,000 members of the Daliban. The pattern that I am seeing is that while you may find quick success inside of a kingdom, such as the Vaushite Empire, the Daliban, or the Groyper Army, it is up to the individual to do something so that you aren't someone's fourth or fifth choice in their respective hierarchy. Lord Carson and Lady Erudite are two people in my mind that have been on two opposite ends of the content grind, and both have seen levels of success that is greater than that of the average vassal of the Daliban. While I could end this video coping about how it's all because of Destiny's magic touch or something, it's actually their magic touch that is helping them retain their own unique audiences over time, while making use of the kingdoms they reside in. A smaller microcosm of this effect revolves around smaller content creators like yours truly and Sick, Serf and Knight of Chud Logic's court. I can safely say that I share a substantial amount of shared audience with Chud Logic. I think Sick would agree as well. With Chud's help, my first major release soared to being the most viewed video on my channel, putting it in front of the eyes of thousands, which trickled down to me doubling my sub count. His negative praise also had an equaling damaging effect in the eyes of our shared audience, and thus, at least for now, my viewers. Evident by the Extreme Daddy Festo Part 2, a less good video, mind you, but still a decent effort, sits closer to my average view count. Quality and relevancy appear to be the most important things you need to gain the court of a king or lord. When Sick released his Lavloon manifesto at the peak of Lavloon-related drama, the same day that she compared Destiny to Harvey Weinstein, it was the perfect opportunity to make a huge splash. The quality of the video is pretty terrible, but the info was amazing, and the relevancy at the time just out of this world. Sick got it in front of the eyes of Lord Chud, and eventually, King Stephen. The Daliban Kingdom has since exploded his video to over 90,000 views, and has solidified Sick Unchained as a 30-viewer Andy, and one of the freshest new up-and-coming knights of the Daliban Kingdom. Sick has also been consistent on the content grind since release, improving each week, taking lessons from our lord, Chud Logic. A formula appears to be forming if you want to try and take advantage of a larger content creator to expand your growth. 1. Create a piece of content or discourse that is high quality or relevant. 2. Gain the court of a large lord, king, or the algorithm. 3. Hope that your consistent efforts after this boost are good enough to gather an audience for yourself so that you too may rise through the ranks of the fiefdom paved by the other content creators that came before you. While it may be beneficial to work your way through the hierarchy in the beginning of your content creator career, I think the only way to really make it big is to strive to create something outside of it. Clearly there are ways to get out there, look at just Pearly Things. She managed to get over 1 million subscribers in just over 8 months from abusing the YouTube Shorts algorithm, a land that is still fairly untamed. If you look at any of the lords or knights in any of the kingdoms, it is rare for one of these content creators to break 10,000 subs on YouTube, or get more than 100 live viewers on Twitch. Which, to be fair, is still really cool and can be a living, but I'm not sure that's where I want to be. I think my content aspirations are set for something outside of this ecosystem, and honestly, maybe even online pull itself. The sparkle and shine of online pull is wavering. For the past year or so, the space has felt a little bit stale, and I feel myself falling prey to the drama just as much as anyone. I'm not above watching a train wreck in real time, but maybe I should be. Over the past year, the most interesting people in this space have been those that associate with the kingdoms the least. The freshest injections into the space are when more mainstream pundits enter, like Brianna Wu or Adam22. How many times can we watch Vaush debate the etymology of water, Destiny play Autism Simulator, or see the N-word typed into King Fuentes' live chat before we ask ourselves, what the fuck are we even doing here? It's my observation that unless you absolutely love the way that online politics is currently set up, unless you are currently making money off of the online poll meta you find yourself in, unless you find the communities to be more engaging than anything else available to you, make sure that you first and foremost are happy and really want to be there. Secondly, make sure that whatever you build can stand on its own, because no one will ever be Destiny, Vaush, Hassan, TYT, mrgirl, Just Pearly Things, Ben Shapiro, or King Fuentes ever again. How many streamers can react to each other before something new has to be done? It appears to me that the ground has been broken. The land has been taken under their control, and as smaller content creators, it might just be time to break out of the current metas we find ourselves in, and push on to foreign lands. Even if it means that we're only fueled by our determination, creativity, and a little bit of luck, instead of the guaranteed audience of a wealthy lord or king.